It's very much alive there, folks. Welcome aboard to the Blind Tinkerer's Workbench.
That's a beautiful radio. Man, the dial cord, that's one thing I could never do. In all the years that I've been doing radios, I never could string a dial cord. I always used to have a couple of radio guys I knew that used to have to do it. They had to do it for me. So if I got a radio that had a broken dial cord, I could never string them, even though I had the diagram for it. Fortunately, both of these, the tuning and the band spread, are both working good. But I got to figure out how to get this top open here. Neat. Now what I did is I downloaded the schematic for this ahead of time, because he had told me on email what the radio was going to be. He says it did not work, it needs restoration. And it's a line connected set. So that's the bad thing about it. And it uses a ballast. But up on the top over there, if you look above the Heath tri-power supply in the corner on the right hand top, there is an isolation transformer that I showed you on a very early video of made with toroids that one of my viewers sent me. So I'm going to use that isolation transformer on this receiver. And then when I get warmer weather, I'm going to run a long wire out and I'm going to put a ground stake in the ground, because I'm going to need that regardless of what radio I have here. And in here, this radio should fit perfectly in here. And I still got enough room to set my little tube tester down here if I need to test tubes and stuff. Or I set the tube tester on the workbench. It's not a problem. Shouldn't have to do this. There it is. I don't like opening things like that. Oh yeah, there it is. Tube location chart. A 3-gang tuning capacitor, so it's probably tuned RF, which is very good. And let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tubes and a ballast. Now, a ballast is in series with the filaments, and when they're bad, I just replace them with power resistors. And there's plenty of room on this chassis to put the power resistors right up on top here. So, he says it don't work, but you know, let's see. It looks like somebody has taken the chassis out and cut the, and taped up the wires. It was done years ago. Alright, let me put this through an isolation transformer and a dim bulb. I'll be right back. Oh, Steve sent me a photocopy of the manual with the schematic also. So I just ran this on the variac and the dim bulb, nothing. So I'm going to test the tubes. This is a series set. So we're going to check all the tubes in here. We'll do that off camera. And then if the tubes filaments are good, then I'm going to check the ballast. I don't see an on-off switch on this set. There's a possibility I might have missed something. This is the standby and receive. So I got it in the standby receive. This I think is a dial light. I'm not sure. I guess I could wire that so that the dial light's always lit. Got 2 bulbs in here. I have to get some number 47s if these are bad, because I don't have any. That's usually what they are, is 47s. So one for the band spread and one for the tuning. You've got two variable capacitors here, 3 gang each. One's the band spread and one's the tuning. A band spread's a very handy thing to have. I am going to commence to test the tubes in this now, and what I'm going to do is to use the B&K 606 to test the tubes. And then later on, now that I got more tubes to work with, I can compare the readings and make an adjustment on the resistor inside here. I'm estimating I'm going to need 3 to 500 ohms in series with the one that's in here now in order to get this reading down to the normal range, matching that of the B&K 606. So now that I got extra tubes, I can go back and forth in comparison and then get this modified where it is working correctly. But that'll be another day for this. Okay, so I'm going to commence to test these tubes. Like I say, I'll do that off camera. And if any of them are bad, well, that's going to put me to a halt right now until I can replace the tubes. But that's not a problem. It's just that I have to order them on eBay. I know why it was sticking. These little pins here. See these little pins right here? They push down and snap into here. But physically, I wasn't able to lift it up because the whole radio lifted up with it. So they fit pretty tight in there, which is a good thing. I like these radios where you can open the top and go from the top and work on them. So I'm going to test the tubes on the B&K 606 for now, make a note of their readings, and then I will test them again on Radio City Products Model 308. We'll do that at another day. This is a close-up of the ballast that was in there. And from inspection with my eye lope, it appears to be okay. But I'm going to put the ohm meter on it and check it. It did not have a cover on it, so it was quite hazardous to reach in there with this thing turned on. Alright, well, upon inspection here, I can see I've got my work cut out for me on this one. And this definitely has to go. This is some kind of a bracket, I guess, that it probably had the original electrolytic can in there. All these caps got to go, every one of them. I haven't checked the ballast out yet. The ballast goes down into this socket here. Naturally, all this stuff's going to have to be replaced. The cord looks like it's in real nice shape. It's heavy, but it is non-polarized, of course. But all these caps are going to have to go, every one of them. The best thing to do when you start on this is to replace the electrolytic. Well, the best thing to do probably is to just cap this gradually. I still got this this radio here to work on too. I haven't heard from Bob, so but that don't take up much room. I can put that anywhere. But what I did is I took my readings of my tubes, and these are the readings I was getting on the B&K 606. So I'm going to check those at a future date on the Radio City Products 308 tube tester and see if I can get the readings to read approximately the same on the scale. The B&K 606, of course, is an emission tester. There is nothing in there that would indicate that it is otherwise. Works very well. So I should be able to set my old tube tester to get the approximate readings pretty close to what the B&K 606 is reading. But that's a future video, as I said. So I've got this thing up on the bench here, and it's pretty big, but it'll fit quite nicely in this area here, I'm sure. Alright, I started working on this, but I have to get some capacitors. All my capacitors are low voltage. They're just not going to work. I need 150 volt electrolytics. The input filter on this radio is 60 microfarads. I have 100. That's kind of a little high. Might put a strain on the rectifier tube. Speaking of rectifier tubes, the lid of the cabinet of this radio calls for a 25Z5. The schematic shows a 25Z6. The two different tubes, electrically, I looked them up in the tube manual, they are electrically the same, but the pinouts are different. I'm going to go by what the schematic calls for and not what the tube lid shows. The pinouts on the 25Z6, pins 3 and 5 at a plate, and they are tied together on the tube socket. Pins 4 and 8 are the cathodes, and they are tied together on the tube socket. You may not be able to see it here, but believe me, they are tied together. So you could not use a 25Z5 in here, even if you wanted to, because I believe it's a 6-pin tube. Again, this is the tube in question, so obviously it's a 25Z6, 8-pin octal. So that solves that mystery. I went by the cover of the, the cabinet. That's usually correct. Maybe they made models of this radio with a 25Z5 in it. But either way, I don't have another one. But I will test this. This tube does light. Even though I had it wrong, it did light in the tube tester. These two have got to be replaced. And then there's a 2-section can that was right here that I took out. And that's a 50-30 that someone put in here. So a 50 is too small. This is the input. This is where it's supposed to be 60 microfarads. So we'll just get the correct one, and I mounted a terminal strip down here to accept those capacitors. These can be put in where these are for these particular ones. And then I got a bunch of wax paper jobs to change. Over here, somebody put a push button switch in it. I don't know, they scratched all this up. This don't belong here. It's disconnected on the radio. I thought it might be the dial light, but it's not. The dial light comes on, and I like the dial lights to stay on anyways, and these type of radios, they usually do stay on. Here's the speaker wire I had to cut off in order to remove the chassis. And I'll probably put some disconnects on there or something. And this is the other end of that switch. It was cut like this when I got the radio. So I have no idea what somebody had in mind when they were doing this. Only one pilot light works. This one's, I think it's this one, is burned out. This one's burned, the main pilot light's burned out. And I'm going to have to order some 47s from, I can get a box of 10 from Sal's Capacitor Corner to have on hand. And I cleaned this up a little bit here. Somebody had wrote on here, on the chassis, looks like 25Z6 or 26. But what I usually do on radios like this is either underneath or on top. I'll take a pencil and I'll mark in what tubes go where. I've got to test this ballast yet. I haven't done that because I've been busy with this tube here. But I did plug it in on the variac and the dim bulb and established that I'm getting a hum out of it, nothing else. This tube is a 6, this has a short. Let's see, that would be 6SC7 is shorted. So we got to get a 6SC7 for this, and we got to test this rectifier tube and the ballast. So, but I want to replace the electrolytics, so it's going to be a while on the restoration of this. It's going to be a gradual thing as money comes in, and I'll order as I go along. And I'm having one hell of a time seeing what I'm doing here, and it's such a sloppy job. I have to tack solder a lot of things because I just cannot see what I'm doing. And I try to do a neat job and try to clean the terminals off. I just cannot do it. I cannot see what I'm doing. And it wasn't exactly a clean job anyways on this radio. The original, as you saw on the earlier video clips, the original capacitor just hung in there, and the leads were tacked in on here. Your input here, and the 20 microfarad here, and then the other 20 microfarad I hook and pinched in here. That'll probably be relocated, maybe not. I don't know yet. It's taken me an hour just to do this little work right here. Alright, so I'm going to try to solder that. I just got that laid on there the best I can do, because I can't stick it in the hole and bend it over, hold a magnifying glass, hold a soldering iron, hold a needle nose. I just cannot do this. So I cleaned off the terminal as best I could. It was a real mess in there, and I have to be careful because of too much solder in it. It bridges out these two. I replaced this resistor here. I got a little heat sink. It's the only heat sink I saved from all my stuff. I had a lot of these little heat sinks to keep the heat off the resistor as much as I can. So I'm going to be doing that off camera to finish that part up. I'm using the Kodak Playful right now because it does a lot better on close-ups than the Sony Bloggy. I had to put 2 new stranded pieces of wire in here. And some of this stuff I had to resolder, even though I didn't have all the connections in, because the damn things kept falling out, especially up here. I had to do a lot of what I call tack soldering. That's what I used to do years ago. If I can't reach into a place to work, or I can't see what I'm doing, I just tack it on. It's not the right way to do it, but it's the blind man's way to do it. Either that or the job don't get done. So, I had to protect this resistor because I had to use a lot of heat. I had to crank up my soldering iron really high. I don't think it's a fault of this soldering station. It's my eyes. I'm wasting a lot of solder. I had to clean a lot of solder out from the bottom of this chassis here because I can't see what I'm doing. So I end up, it's the wrong way to do it, taking the soldering iron, filling it with solder, and bringing it over and putting it on a thing. And it's the wrong way to solder, but you have to. So I put a lot of solder on here, and then I put it on the wire, and then I put it on the iron, and then I bring all of them over and do it. I mean, that's a crappy way to work. It's not the proper way. So that's why a lot of stuff like this here is done with the hook and pinch method. It's so much easier to do it that way. The cathode bypass for the audio output tube, electrolytic, which I cut out of here. I need to get in here, so I had to cut some of this stuff out. So I got a lot of stuff cut out of here. And I have to remember where it goes. Of course, I got the schematic. So now the only thing I got is the cathode bypass capacitor and the cathode bypass resistor, which is right here, which is supposed to be 150 ohms. It's 100 and almost 190 something ohms. So I'm going to change that. And I'm going to replace the cathode bypass resistor for the audio output tube, which calls for a 10 microfarad. That's what was in there. You're looking, I can't point because I'm holding the schematic and holding the camera too, but the 25L6 has 150 ohm cathode bypass resistor and a 10 microfarad. I'm going to increase that. What that'll do is give a little more audio gain, and it'll bring the bottom up a little bit when you're listening to AM, and that's why I want to put an external speaker on this. Also, the coupling capacitor, which I cannot read here, but as I recall, I think it was an 01. I'm going to increase that to an 047. That'll give a little bit more lows coming through. This is not high fidelity, of course, but you don't want the tinny sound. So I want to make those modifications. So I'll be putting a 047 in there in place of the 01. And I think you can probably, I don't know, it's all dark here for some. I'll take it away from the light, and somehow the light is making it worse. Here's the 01 right here. Goes to the grid, 470 ohm cathode. Grid resistor. So that's good. I used to make a lot of modifications in radios and stuff by increasing the coupling capacitor and increasing the cathode bypass. Not going to go crazy with it. I just want to put more than a 10. I might put a 20 or 25 in there. I've got them, and they're low voltage electrolytics, so I've got a lot of low voltage electrolytics. That's not the problem. The problem is capacitors. I don't have any higher voltage capacitors. Like these I got from Sal's. These are 047 at 630 volts, and so are these. These are 0.1s. But that's all I have. I have 5 of these 047s and then 2 of the 0.1s. And this radio uses quite a bit of 0.1s. It uses a ton of 047s and quite a few 005s, which actually will be 0047 in here. And then up here in the top right hand corner, you could see a paper cap in there. That's going to be hard for me to get in there with my rotten eyesight, so I'll probably clip the lead short to the capacitor like I usually do. Hook and pinch. That's the best way when you're blind. I used to always hook and pinch anyways. That's the way I do it. It's not a showpiece. My only concern with these is this has got the small IF cans, and those are noted. I don't know if it would apply to this vintage radio for silver mica disease, and I hope that's not the case, because that would be a big problem trying to put a capacitor in there. You got 1, 2, 3 of these cans that I can see from the bottom of the chassis, but there's a lot of wax caps. Here's a 01. And the others I have to get my magnifying glass out because I can't read them. You probably might be able to see them on the video. This one here, it's strange because this one here looks like a 3 or 4 water. This is a carbon comp 1000 ohm. It reads about 1300. I left it in. The 100 ohm, which was only a half watt, and I got a 1 watt in there. This happens to be a 5%. That was way off. That went way high. So I changed that. I'm going to leave this in, but it's strange that they use a high wattage here, and they only used a half a watt here, and over here it's supposed to be 15 ohms. They parallel 2 half watts coming off the cathode of the 25 Z6. And I checked it and it reads about 21 ohms. So I'm leaving that because I can't get a 80 microfarad capacitor, electrolytic. So I put in 100. It calls for a 60 on the input filter. And I'll show you here on the schematic. I hope you can read that. I'm about 3 to 4 inches away. That's about as close as I would want to get with this camera. On the input filter, it uses, I think that's a 300 micromic capacitor. That's for RF, getting into the power supply. The first capacitor, the print isn't all that clear, but it's a 60 microfarad. Then it goes through I believe that's a 1000 ohm resistor. That's that big one. Then it goes into a 20 microfarad, which I've got a 22 in there. Then that 100 ohm resistor, then another 22 microfarad capacitor. So the first capacitor input filter is now 100 microfarads. I either had a choice of putting in a 47 instead of the 60. That's too low. Or go to 100. There's nothing in between. At least wise on a couple of places I've looked for capacitors. The resistor that you're looking at, I believe that's R40, right off the cathode of the 25Z6, calls for 15 ohms. R40 in the parts list, which I do have. Like I say, those two resistors are right here, and they have gone up to 21 ohms, so that's good. The reason I'm not going to change them, it's just funny, it's 2.5 watts, so that's only 1 watt. But they used only a 1 watt here, a 3 or 4 watt resistor here. I'm guessing it's an old carbon comp, so it would be larger physically than the modern ones. And only a 0.5 watt here, which I put in as a 1 watt modern resistor. So this went up to 22 ohms. So because of that, that's a benefit because it won't put a strain on the rectifier as much because the input filter is now 100 microfarads. Here's the other 22, and the wires are already wired in. And here is the second 22 microfarad right here.